So I've had the car about 2 weeks now, put about 600 or so miles on it in that time. Having a lot of fun with it. It's been a great daily driver, way more comfortable than I thought it was going to be. And like I do with cars I own, I like to know how they work. So I've been doing a lot of data logging on it. What we're going to do today is talk about 0 to 60 time on the automatic. It's not a lot of videos, not a lot of information out there because, ooh, gross, automatic, whatever. But that's my goal, is let's give some information about the automatic and the drivetrain and that and how it works. That stuff interests me. It's what I do for a career. So I like to, figure out how they work, what they do. So we're going to discuss like a regular 0 to 60, what that looks like if you're just from a stop and you're popping it, or when you try launch control, and then what is actually different in the car, like what is it doing differently to achieve those times. And then I've got some Dragys to show the difference between them, and yeah, there is a difference. Launch control does shave off a little bit of time. I've heard some people say it's not super aggressive, but for a factory launch control, it actually is, it's pretty aggressive, at least on a couple of them that I did today. So these are the best results I got out of multiple tries on just like a slight brake boosted launch and then a launch control. So the quickest I got was 5.75 and the 1 foot was 5.55. The launch control was 5.37 and then a 1 foot of 5.14. So, my DA is over 4,000 feet based on where I live, and then, it's still fairly warm. So I'm not displeased with it at all. If I wanted a faster car, I would have picked one up. I wanted this car, because it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. So this is a brake boosted launch up to just a little bit over 2,000 RPM. So for launch control to do its thing, you have to be in sport, traction to expert mode, put your foot on the brake, pull both paddles, it'll say launch ready. Like that. So what makes a regular launch different from a launch control launch? So you have to understand a little bit about a torque converter and its purpose. Now, its sole job is to take engine torque and amplify it and convert the torque into something bigger than it is. So when you're taking off with a little bit of a brake boost, in this picture, we've got three things that is showing here on the graph. We've got engine speed, which is orange. We've got turbine speed, which is input shaft speed after the torque converter. So like the actual speed going into the transmission. And then commanded engine torque. So what you can see is turbine speed is at 0. That's when we're completely stopped, but engine speed is around 1,000 RPM. So that's where the converter is just sitting there slipping. You're at an idle, ready to go. So when you start to move, the converter allows the engine to spin up, starts multiplying the torque, and you take off. So what we can see in this graph here is at 2,200 RPM, after I've kind of stalled it and held it there, we start to move. The engine commanded torque at that time is 70 pound-feet. Now the transmission's converter, its stall torque ratio, which means the amount of torque that it multiplies, is 1.7. So to get going, at that point when the engine's commanding 70, then you take that torque and you times it by the 1.7 to get you to 119 pound-feet of torque to get moving. So that's all just really basic math. There's a lot more involved to it, but that'll kind of explain what we do. So we get going. Then the torque converter clutch actually works differently in sport mode versus just regular. And I'll have another video a little later on that goes into more detail on the transmission, the converter, and everything else along that. But the converter starts to lock up at about 4,000 RPM, and that's where you can see the lines of the engine speed getting closer to the turbine speed. So it's still in flex lockup. It's not a full lockup in first gear. So the torque multiplication is done. You're taking off, and it's commanding 200 and just a hair over 250 pound-feet of torque at that point in first gear. Drops torque during the shift, brings it back, same thing. So we're in first, second, third gear on this graph before I let off. So that brings us to what that same graph looks like under launch control. So what the vehicle is allowing it to do is allowing it to build boost. It's not pulling as much timing and it's commanding more torque. So you can see that there's a pretty good bump in engine speed RPM, a fair amount before we have any turbine speed. So what that does is you're doing your launch control, and as soon as you let off, then we're going to have turbine speed. So you let off, the car gets going. At this point, with launch control, that's right around 3,000 RPM, is what I recorded for most of my launches today. So if we take the torque that it's commanding there, times it by the stall ratio, we'll get a significantly more amount of torque versus a normal launch. So what it was commanding at about 3,000 RPM when we start moving is 146 pound-feet of torque. We times that by our stall torque ratio. That gives us 248 pound-feet of torque going into the transmission. What that does is it gives us more of kind of like how when you launch a manual transmission, you're going to rev it up, you're going to go. It gives us a similar effect with the automatic, with doing launch control, but you're holding it at a steady RPM. And something to keep in mind whenever you're doing a brake boosted launch or launch control, that is hard on the converter and it is hard on the transmission, and there's a tremendous amount of heat that it generates really quickly. I did see anywhere from 5 to 10 degrees of transmission fluid after each run that would pull up pretty extensively when I was doing launch control. The good news is in addition to the warmer on the transmission, they actually have that cooler off to the side, so it pulls temperature down very quickly when you're doing that. So keep that in mind. And then Toyota does monitor, they have like an estimated thermal degradation of the fluid PID that you can look at. To give you an example of, I think 7 or 8 launches today. The car has 7,000 miles on it, and before it had an estimated thermal degradation of 150. After those launches, I was up to 333. So it does take that into calculation. Now to keep in mind that it's like a 50,000 unit, so I'm not anywhere close to doing that. I will be doing my transmission fluid early for a lot of reasons, but something to keep in mind that it is stressful on the transmission to do that. You do want to let it cool down. You don't want to just do it all the time. You will cause damage.